Now, I did just want to go over what we plan to cover today. So we'll start by talking about how to set up your hierarchy. From there, we'll talk about using forms for intake. Next, we'll talk about task setup and execution with custom fields. From there, I'll show you how to build your first automation. And then finally, I'll show you how you can use views for better work management. And then, of course, at the end, we'll take some time for Q&A. All right, if that all looks good, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm in my workspace now, and the first thing I wanted to call out is when you first start using the platform, you may notice the sidebar here. So the sidebar is where all of your options and features will be available. And this is also primarily where your hierarchy exists. Your hierarchy is the place where all of your spaces reside. And your spaces are primarily going to be used for your teams or your departments. However, if you did have a really large cross-functional project, you may want to elevate that to a space level as well, just for visibility. Now, one quick tip that I have for you with regard to your hierarchy is if there are spaces that you don't interact with regularly, you can actually go ahead and hide those spaces. So I'd recommend taking the time to audit the spaces that you see here and just remove any spaces that you don't see yourself interacting with regularly. For my example today, I'll be a member of the marketing team, and let's just say I don't really collaborate that much in the software development space, so I'm going to go ahead and hide that, or the IT space. By doing this, I make the hierarchy much more intentional and easier to navigate overall, because now I only see the spaces that I actually regularly interact with. And just a heads up, by hiding those spaces, you don't lose access to them, you don't lose notifications from them if you get tagged in something. You still have full access to all of the tasks and information in those spaces. You're just hiding them from your view to make navigation more streamlined for yourself. All right, now as mentioned, let's just say that we are coming from the marketing team today. And I did want to give you a couple of tips if you're just starting to set up your first workflows. So here, let's go ahead and open up our marketing team space. You'll notice when you open the space, you should already have one single list available there for you to use. And that's my first tip for you, is that you don't necessarily need to start off with folders. You can actually start off with lists. And my suggestion here as a best practice would be to start off with 2 lists. So you're going to start with one list for intake, and you're going to add a second list for your ongoing projects. So let's go ahead and add that second list now. And I'm going to call my second list ongoing projects. And then I'm going to go ahead and also rename my first list intake, because this is where I'm going to house all of our newly incoming work. It's definitely a best practice to separate your intake process or your intake list from your ongoing projects. This way, you always know what tasks are new or incoming, or that you need to triage and potentially prioritize and then move into your ongoing projects. Also, you'll have a really clear view of all the projects that are currently in flight by going to that ongoing projects list. One final tip I have for your hierarchy and your lists is that you should really be very intentional with your statuses. So if I mouse over the ellipses here, I can get access to my list settings, and you can see I have the list settings option right here. When you open up your list settings, this is where you'll be able to choose your list statuses. And if I click here, now you can see all of the statuses that I'm currently using for this list. And I would even argue that the status set that I have here is actually too complex, because I could easily move this approval process out of this status set and just capture it in a custom field so that it doesn't clog up or clutter up the statuses that we're using for our regular projects and tasks that might not have that approval process involved. And then I did have one other thing I wanted to mention with regard to your intake process, and that is that you should really be standardizing this intake process by using a form. So let me go up here to our views and actually add a form to this intake list and just walk you through some of the features and functionality that we have inside of our forms. So I'm going to go to plus view here, and I'm going to go ahead and add a form. And from here, once I add the form, you'll notice that we have these form templates that you can make use of. So if you're doing an intake list, or if you're doing project feedback or an order form, you have some starting points here. But let's go ahead and choose project intake, because that's really what we're using this list for. So when I click on project intake, you can see that we now have this form that gets pre-generated. Here it has an introduction to the form, talking about getting the project started. We've got fields here for the project name, additional details about the project, the priority of the project, additional relevant information. And you can see here we have the ability to add additional questions. So any questions or any information that you would need in order to triage your projects and prioritize them, you can capture those data points by adding different questions here. And any question that you add here is going to show up on your task as a custom field. So let's go ahead and just add one new custom field as an example here. So we'll just do dates, and let's add a start date. So maybe just by having the start date, it would help us to better prioritize which projects we want to start first. Now, along with the form building, which is your first tab here, you also have your settings and your preview. If I click on preview, it's going to show me what this form will now look like to anybody who wants to submit. And from the preview tab, you do also have the ability to submit a form as a test to see what that submission will look like in task format. And then finally, let's talk a little bit about your settings. So forms do come with a number of really cool and useful settings here. Depending on where you've set up the form, you'll have the ability to choose where that form will generate its task. Because this form was created on a list, we don't have the ability to make that choice. So you can see that any submission that gets made on this form is going to generate a task on our new intake list. We also have the ability here to add an assignee automatically. So if you're working on your own, or if you want all tasks to be assigned to a single person and you know who that person is, you can actually set that up here instead of having to make an automation. You also have the ability to apply a template to your form submission. So if you have a specific task template that you want applied to your tasks upon submission of the form, you have that ability here. And then you also have some cool submission settings. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the rest of the features on this form, but the last one I'll call out here is your ability to use the form link. So coming over here, this is where you will see the link to the form. If I open up this little arrow, you'll notice that you can use an embed code here. So if you want to embed the form on your emails or on a landing page on your website, you have the ability to actually embed the form there and to copy the code to do so. So let's go ahead and head back to our list. And instead of using a form for this example, I'm actually just going to create a task manually. So let's just say that we're on the marketing team. We've had a recent meeting and there was a new idea for a new campaign. All I need to do is go ahead and to action on that idea, I want to convert that idea to a task. So I'm going to go ahead and choose add task. And let's just say that we had this idea for a brand new campaign that was called the Seize the Day campaign. And by the way, it doesn't matter if you're in marketing, operations, HR, IT, software. All use cases can use this same process of creating an intake list and then adding all of your new tasks to that intake list. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to use AI to create my description. So let's go ahead and choose the Write with AI option for my description. I'm just going to paste in the name of this campaign, which is the Seize the Day marketing campaign. And I'm going to go ahead and hit return and allow AI to create a task description for me. And just for the sake of example, let's say we agreed with everything the AI came up with here. So now all I need to do is insert that description into the task. Finally, I'm going to go ahead and create the task. Now you can see that we've already created this task and we've got some default fields that we can use to triage and decide how we want to prioritize this. So we can do things like adding the assignee. And by the way, if you ever want to add yourself as an assignee, all you have to do is mouse over the assignee field and hit M for me, and it will assign it to yourself. You can add a due date here. So let's just go ahead and add a due date for this example. And you also have the ability to add a priority. Now that this task is set up, let's go ahead and jump inside the task and take a look at all of the tools we have within the task itself. So I'm going to go ahead and jump inside the task by clicking on it. This is going to open up my task view. So here you can see that now I can see all of the details of this task. I can see the task name. I can see all of the task default fields that are available here, like status, assignee, priority. If you wanted to do time estimates or time tracking, you would have that available here. You also have the ability to add tags here or any relationships to other work. Scrolling down, you can see that here is where that task description came in. So anybody that I tag into this particular task will actually know all of the context of this work based off the description that's already been added here. If I wanted to add subtasks, you'll notice that when I click on the subtasks tab here, I have the ability to also use AI to suggest subtasks for this task. So let's go ahead and do that. And then all we need to do is choose the specific subtasks that we want to keep. So let's go ahead and keep just a couple of these. And finally, I wanted to call out the details section. The details are where you're going to be able to add any additional fields or custom fields to this task. In this case, you'll notice that I have a reviewer field available. So I do know that I'm working with the marketing department head, whose name is Amy. I'm going to go ahead and tag her in as the reviewer here. And finally, I'm going to go ahead and now move over to my comments and @mention Amy and let her know that we've got this task ready to go. So to do so, all I need to do is hit the @ key. That's going to pull up all of my team members. I can go ahead and select Amy here. And from here, I'm just going to say, hey, Amy, I've set up this new project. I'm adding you as a reviewer. And by tagging Amy in this task, what I'm also doing is you'll notice that this bell icon just updated and went from 1 to 2. And now I've actually added her as a watcher on this task. Watchers are really important in ClickUp because you'll always want to keep your assignees singular. So we know that I am actually currently the one assigned to this task. We want to keep our assignees singular so that we know who is responsible for the task at a given stage of that task's lifecycle. But there might also be other people that need to be updated on the task or do review. And in this case, that's Amy. Maybe let's say that we also want to tag our teammate Alicia in here so she can get updates as well. Anybody who's tagged in as a watcher is going to get all of the same updates that the assignee will get. So as the task status is updated, as new messages get passed back and forth in the comments, as the description gets updated, any updates that you make to this task are going to generate notifications that will land in any of the watchers or assignees inbox. So let's actually go ahead and mark this task as planning. And finally, let's add one final custom field to this task. So as mentioned, we've got Amy who we've tagged in as a reviewer. And let's just say that we've got a review process that we also want to capture as a part of the work that we're doing on all of these new marketing campaigns. Instead of housing that process in our statuses, which could make our status set overly complex or long, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to create a custom field for that so that we can capture both the status of the task and the process of that review simultaneously. So here, let's go ahead and add a new custom field. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a drop-down custom field. And my suggestion to you as well, as a best practice, definitely take a look at drop-downs as maybe the first custom field that you explore. And a great place to incorporate custom fields like a drop-down is a sub-process, like a review process. So let's go ahead and add this drop-down custom field. And let's just call this Marketing QA. And we can add a description here. We also have the ability to fill this task with AI. So what this means, if you do have AI enabled, you can actually tell the platform to analyze your tasks based off of things like the task name and description and priority and updates, and actually create updates to your custom fields automatically. Now, in this case, we don't necessarily want to do that. I think for this process, we actually want the people to own it manually and make the updates manually. So in that case, I'm going to go ahead and switch this off, but we also have the ability to use AI to suggest options for our custom fields. So I'm going to go ahead and choose suggest options here. And now we've got not started, in progress, in review, approved, rejected. That looks pretty good to me. You'll notice that the AI also picked out some nice colors here. I'm going to go ahead and create this custom field. And now you can see that custom field has actually been added to this task as marketing QA. And we can go ahead and update that. All right, this task looks ready to go. I think we're done with the planning stage. We can actually move this to in progress. And let's close this task and then talk about the next stages of our workflow. So now that our task has been created and set up, we can prioritize it and we can move it to our ongoing projects list, or we could move it to whichever location the person who's going to deliver on this task works out of. To do so, I could drag and drop that task into that location if I wanted to, but to be honest, that's not super scalable, and over time, it's not going to be the best way to do things. I also have the ability to use the ellipses here to get more options, and here I do also have the ability to move this task to another location by clicking on move, and I could choose the ongoing projects, but that's not going to be really efficient. And so what we can do instead is create an automation. And so what we can do is go up to our automations here and say, anytime a task is prioritized as urgent or high, and we know who the assignee is, so let's say is assigned to myself, we're then going to move that task to the ongoing projects list for that person to deliver on. And depending on who the assignee is on that task, we could send it to any different lists for that particular person to deliver. So let's go ahead, create that automation. So that's now set up. And now we've got the beginnings of a workflow, right? We've managed our intake process. We could use a form to better streamline that process. Now we've got our intake list. As tasks come into this list, we can update them, prioritize them, and assign them out. And we've got an automation that automatically, based off of the assignment and priority, will send that task to the particular location where that person needs to deliver on it. So now that we've actually got our work in flight and the foundation of a workflow created, let's go ahead and take a look at how to better manage our work. So you may have noticed that I have this additional marketing space here. Let's pull that one up. The reason that I've got two is this one is already better established. So this is what a space might look like once you've got teams that have scaled inside of ClickUp and you've got multiple different initiatives running inside a department. So here you can see we've got campaigns and promotions, content management, we've got a creative and design team. We've got a lot going on. But what I wanted to call out here is if you were to click on the marketing space, you'll notice that I've already added a document called Welcome to the Marketing Team. And this document is basically like the landing page for our team. So here it says Welcome to the Marketing Team. And you can see I've got all these different documentation to help people understand how to work and engage with our team. I've got a Meet the Team doc that talks through all of our different team members. I've got information on what a marketing campaign is. I've even got SOPs for requesting a blog or starting a marketing campaign. And what's really cool is I can actually go ahead and mark any of these documents as wikis. And if you have AI enabled on the platform, you can even ask AI questions about how to work with the marketing team or who's on the marketing team. And the AI is going to prioritize any of your verified wiki documents and surface those answers to you first based off of the information that you've already added to the platform. So it's really easy to build an internal intranet that people can search and get any information that they need about your teams and how to work together. And by the way, all of this documentation that you see, it's actually all based off of doc templates. So it didn't take me that long to set any of this up. So now that we've set up our work, let's talk a little bit about managing our work. And I'm going to use this marketing space as my example. So in this situation, you can see we've got all of this work taking place inside the platform. If I were to try to navigate across the hierarchy here, that might be a bit of a challenge. So instead of trying to navigate between all of these locations, what I can do is go to the top level location, which is our space, our marketing space, click here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set up and establish a list for my team to work out of and find their work. So here you can see I've already created a list for my work for anybody on the marketing team. So anybody on the marketing team can come to our space level, click on my work, and find their work. And to set this up, there's a few tips that I'm going to give you here. So first of all, if I click on my work, right now it's pulling in all of the tasks from all of the locations within the space. So you can see all of the tasks in all of the lists and all of the folders here. If I were to try to scroll through here, you can see that there's just a ton of information. We're also separating things out by list and by status. And because we have multiple lists and statuses, it's really hard to see across all the work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my grouping here. And you can see by default, we're grouping by status and by list. And if I wanted to, I could group by things like assignee, priority tags, etc., even custom fields. But in this case, I just want to make everything much more streamlined and easier to access. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to group by none. So it's this little trash can icon here, which sometimes goes overlooked. If I click this, now there's no grouping in this view, and you can see it looks almost like a spreadsheet. So it's much more streamlined and a little bit easier to navigate, but look at all the work that's taking place here. I mean, if I really wanted to sort and find my own work, it still might be quite a bit of a challenge. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use me mode. By clicking on me mode, I'm now only going to see the tasks that are specifically assigned to me. And by the way, this me mode is set for anybody who's coming to this view. So it doesn't matter if it's me or Alicia or David, whoever is coming to this view is going to see the specific tasks that are assigned to them. Now you might be thinking, well, it looks like you've got most of the tasks that are assigned to you. Why does David and Alicia have tasks assigned to them even though you set it to me mode? Well, if I go ahead and open up my subtasks, you'll see that under this parent task, there are subtasks that have been assigned to me. So that's why they're being pulled up. But it's not that easy to find, right? Because if I wanted to find my specific subtasks, I'd have to go ahead and open up every parent task and open up those sets of subtasks if I needed to. So that's where our third option comes in. It's the option for subtasks. So instead of using the default of collapse all, I'm going to go ahead and show subtasks as separate tasks. And because we're in me mode, now I only see the specific tasks and subtasks that are assigned to me. And if I ever needed to see which task was a subtask, you'll see that it has this little subtask icon next to it. And if I mouse over the subtask icon, you can see it's going to show me what the parent task name is. Now that this view is all set up and looks great, I'm going to go ahead and click Save to save this view. And what you might also want to do here is just go ahead and protect this view so that other team members can't come in and make changes to it. So you can just say that this is going to be our team view. Anybody on our team can actually come to this view. It's going to be pre-set up for them to see their specific work, whether they need to see their tasks or subtasks. Everything is going to be much more easily organized here. And that's really everything that I wanted to talk through today. So today we talked through, again, setting up your hierarchy. We talked about how to use forms for your intake process. We talked about task setup and execution using your custom fields. From there, we talked about how to build your first automation. And then we finally talked a little bit about how to use views for better work management. So as mentioned, I want to take some time now to go through the Q&A and answer some of the questions that have come through to
Hey Elliot, you're on mute.
Thanks. All right. Hey, everybody. Sorry about that. So I saw so many amazing questions came through, and I'm going to do my best to organize those questions as best I can based off of general feedback and some of the feature-specific questions that we received. Just immediate call out, the session was recorded, so I know we went pretty quickly through a lot of information. You will get that recording sent out to you. I saw Mercedes, you had asked about this session that we had earlier in the week. We'll definitely be getting that out to you. I believe that email is actually going out today, so be on the lookout for that. And then, yeah, just wanted to go through some of the questions one by one to see how much, or just to organize based off of some of the general feedback versus maybe some of the feature-specific questions that we got.
See, that's
So
good.
there were questions also about, setting up alerts for warning or a task is due. How do I know that a task has been addressed? I think if you look at my screen now, you can see that, you can always organize your tasks by due date. In that view that I set up with you together a moment ago, where I have my work, you can see that, you can filter by me mode, and then you can filter by due date to see what tasks are currently due and organized by due date. So that's one way to see those tasks. You can always set up automations to send you notifications if you'd like, to let you know that a task is almost due. So that can be set up in our due date automations. And then the other thing that I would mention is, you might actually want to do that via a dashboard. So dashboard would also be a great way to see all of your tasks that are coming up or might be due and tasks that are completed. We do have a session dedicated to dashboards coming out next week. So just be on the lookout for that additional session that you may want to join. All right, I know we're over time, so apologies for that. I think I've got time for just a couple more questions. Maybe we'll go with questions about forms, because I think there were a lot of questions about forms. So when it comes to your forms, we did get quite a few questions about how to create the forms, how to update your custom fields inside of your forms, and then how to share those forms with your stakeholders, especially external stakeholders, and then how do you get notified when those forms are submitted. So again, to add a form, you're just going to want to hit plus view, use the form button here to add a new form. Here you can see I've already got a form that I'm using. When you go into build, you'll notice that if I click on the image here, I do actually have the ability to change the image. You also have the ability to add a cover to your forms if you want to make them look a little bit cleaner and nicer. And then when it comes to your fields, you do have the ability to add fields by using the add question button here. So the add question button is really going to open up the different fields that you have access to edit and change those fields. There was a question about changing one type of field to another type. I don't think that there's an easy way to convert a field within the form itself. So I would probably recommend just creating a new field that makes more sense if it was maybe an assignee field, but you actually need a text field to understand, who's submitting the form. And that was another question we got about how do I know who's submitted? You'll definitely need to create at least some either text field, or you can see that I'm using the project name or the task name field here to capture the name of the project or maybe the name of the person who's submitting that form to your team. And then when it comes to actually getting that form out to other people to submit, when you check out the preview section, actually, I think you can now see it across all these. It doesn't matter what tab you're in. On the right-hand side is where you can copy the link. So here's where you can actually copy the link to the form. You'll notice if you click on the down arrow here, there's also an embed code. So if you want to embed the form on a website or in an email and send that form out to external stakeholders for new types of work, you do have that ability. And then once those forms are submitted, as long as you are, so in my settings here, I can assign those tasks automatically to myself. So in that case, I'm always going to get the notifications when those forms are submitted. Alternatively, you may want to set up an automation that posts a comment and tags whoever's responsible for managing the new requests as they come in. So those are two ways that you can just make sure that you're notified once those forms are submitted. Okay, and then I think that also covers, so when forms are submitted, you can use this assign tasks to option in the forms to automatically assign them to people. The other way to do it would be through automations. So you always have the ability to create automations. Let me head over to my list view and show where my automations are. So you always have the ability to create automations based off of, the form submission or a custom field being updated, whatever trigger you'd like, you can then assign those tasks to specific individuals based off of any trigger that you'd like. And then I think there was one question about custom fields that I wanted to answer. Maybe this will be the last question because I know we're 5 minutes over. There was a question about the assignee field, and somebody had mentioned that they didn't have the same assignee field or reviewer field that I was using in my projects. And I just wanted to call out that field was actually a field that I had created. So that was my own custom field that I had created for my particular projects. So if you'd like to, you can always create that custom field yourself. The way to do it is on your list view, just click on the plus icon here. And from here is where you'll have the ability to create new fields. So in this case, it was a people field that I was using, and then I just named it reviewer. And then I would add the reviewer in as a person who's going to review those tasks. And by the way, anytime you use a people field in ClickUp and then tag somebody in as a person on that task, they will get notified in their inbox about that new. All right, I had the ability to answer all of the questions that came through, but I know we're over time, so just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody who came today. Hopefully you were able to take some things away from the session today and learn some new things. Hopefully some of you got your questions answered as well. Also just wanted to reiterate the recording is going to get out to you. And then along with that recording, we do have links to the resources, and you can check out the ClickUp University course on building your first workflow, which will walk you through step-by-step everything that we talked through today. So just want to say thanks again for joining. Really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today and learn a little bit more about ClickUp, and really looking forward to hearing about your continued success on the platform and hopefully seeing you again in an upcoming webinar. So thanks again.